Hey guys, it's Wolf and Storm here, aka 80s Child, aka Lisa, and I'm coming at you today with a brand new, what else, Doctor Who video. Before I start, if you hear any womp womp in the background, that is probably a fan going because it is incredibly hot where I am at. So, sorry for that background noise. I will try to edit it out as best I can when I do my video editing process. Anyhow, so before I get into the article, I just want to give props to some really fantastic YouTubers that I have subscribed to who have also discussed this particular article and have gone into in depth a lot about our fandom rage over what has happened to Doctor Who over the past years. If you have the opportunity, please check out these YouTube sites: Nerdrotics, Bowlestrek, ProblemsBeing, the Tardis Zone, Starry Knight. Check them out. They're all awesome. And please, please remember the doctor's promise: never cruel or cowardly. Please be kind, but never give up and never give in. Yes, we will not cow down to those members of fandom out there who only want to strike us down every time we launch a criticism at the show. And I have to tell you, the criticisms are not unfounded. The problem is that a lot of the fandom are so wrapped up in Jodie that if you dare to make a criticism or call them out for what you believe is something not right with the show, whether it be her or Chibnall, you get...
I think he wants to communicate.
But I have seen horrible tweets in reference to these people's family members, spouses, children, all kinds of things, just saying horrible, horrible, nasty things that are just completely out of line. Now, look, I know that the fandom menace can be a bit crazy, and yes, we are very opinionated, but we have never actually gone after someone personally. And I don't think that we ever would, because that's not what we're about. We're not here to attack individuals. We're not here to attack members of fandom. We're here to support a show that we love very much, and a show that we have been behind for many decades, that we see falling apart. And we do so out of a deep sense of love for this show, not because we hate Jodie. If you've ever gone and looked at any of the podcasts that any of these people have done, even any of the videos that I've done, if you've looked at any of the tweets, anything that they've ever posted, they've never actually posted anything derogatory about Jodie Whittaker herself. That's not what this has ever been about. They've never posted anything derogatory about Chibnall himself as a person. Our issues have and always will be about the level of creativity, the abysmal writing and storylines, Jodie's inability to play the Doctor as a character, and the social justice implications that are invading the show as a whole. It is not because she's a woman. And I'm going to tell you why. Before I get into that, I just want to explain a little bit of my cred here, because I know I'm just a singular person, right? So why would anybody want to listen to little old me? But as I have stated in many of my tweets, and even in my descriptions on YouTube and everything I've done before, even way back when I was doing Once Upon a Time and all that stuff, I am a fandom grandma. I have no problem telling anybody how old that I actually am. I like to make into a little bit of a game. But yes, I am 41 years old. I have been doing fandom in one form or another probably since the age of 7, way back in the 80s. Yeah, just let that one sink in, okay? I have wormed my way in and out of different shows and in and out of different fandoms for many years, so believe me, I have seen everything that you can possibly think of where it concerns fandom. I have been through the wars, I've seen the battles, and I have seen some shit. And I've always managed to come out the other side. Talk to anybody that was a oncer when the show was on from 2011 until 2018, and they can tell you the same. We've all been through it, and we've all seen some shit. Granted, years ago it was very different. We didn't have the connectivity that we do now with the internet, and Twitter, and Facebook, and all this other mess. We just had fanzines and little Yahoo groups and Usernets, and that was where we did our blasting. And it didn't reach nearly as many people as it is able to reach now. So I honestly think y'all should be grateful that you're able to reach the amount of people that you're able to reach. But you take advantage of it. A lot of people take advantage of it in such a horrible way by going after people personally over a show, over something that's not even, I mean, it is, I understand it's real to you and it's real to me, but that doesn't mean that you should dox somebody over the internet. That doesn't mean that you should go after their family members and call them horrible, cruel, and hurtful things. Go after their children. I mean, children, honestly, it's disgusting. It really is disgusting. I thought I'd seen the height of nastiness when it came to the Ones fandom. This is even worse. But then again, it's been a while for me because, like I've said in my past videos, I haven't really been in Doctor Who fandom in a good number of years since after David left and Moffat took over because of my own personal reasons and other personal life issues. But now that I've seen the direction of the show, you're probably asking yourself, well, if you hate the direction of the show, why are you still in it? Because I will always be, at the end of the day, a Doctor Who fan. Period. It doesn't matter to me how horrible that the show gets. I will just choose not to watch the current iteration. That doesn't mean that I can't watch the past stuff, because that will always be there. That is my Who. That is my show. And I'm not going to just kick it to the curb because of the crap that the BBC has done and the crap that Chibnall has done for them. I might not like where it's gone, but that doesn't mean I'm going to give up on it. If they can fix it, I will try to be there for it. It feels almost like it's dead and buried to me, but I don't want to go there just yet. I know everybody else is, oh my God, it's dead and buried, but I still feel in my heart of hearts that the show can be rescued. I won't necessarily say it's something that can be done overnight. I think if Jodie decides to make this season her last and then she leaves, I think the show needs to break. A real honest to God break. I'm not talking about just 1 year. I think it's going to need a lot of time. Not just for the show itself, but for BBC to get its shit straight. Because the show can't come back the way it needs to come back without BBC cleaning house, basically, and getting their heads back on straight. You can't produce a show if you don't know how to run it. And you can't run it when you're constantly being, overshadowed by a bigger corporation that is controlling your every move. I wish that Chibnall would have more, how do I say this without sounding horrible, more balls, I guess, to come forward and do the show justice. But instead, he has chosen to bend a knee to the BBC and do whatever they want. It's funny because way back in the day, when he was just a young little fan baby, when he was a teenager, he had some of the same complaints that we do now.
It could have been a lot better. It could have been slightly better written, especially the last story. Well, not only that, but it was also very cliched. It was very routine, running up and down corridors and silly monsters. It was perhaps a little too routine Doctor Who, very much what the audience is expecting. It's not really very challenging for them to watch.
Just, your commonplace Doctor Who, and that fans wanted to see more. And yet, he's written episodes in his 2 years that he's been in control of the show that have exactly that. Praxis being the big one right there with the pating. Okay, so anyway. So we're going to get to this article. This is by Cineblend. Why do so many people dislike Doctor Who's female doctor? I really feel like this should be retitled, Why do so many people fail to connect with Jodie Whittaker's iteration of the Doctor? It is by Mick Jost. And I really feel like once you get into this, you'll see it's more of an opinion piece than anything else, because he keeps every tidbit that he puts out of explanations to why apparently we don't like her is the same thing said over and over, just in a different way. And he doesn't really have anything to back it up. The article doesn't really address the actual pervasive issues and problems that the show is going through right now that have contributed to the ratings dropping substantially. It's just the same, oh, you don't like her because she's female crap. Yeah, no. Doctor Who is now a couple of seasons into Jodie Whittaker's tenure, and while some minds have been changed on her time on the BBC series, other fans still aren't convinced. For some, Whittaker and the overall idea of a female incarnation of the Doctor is unacceptable, and it's looking like nothing will change their views on that. I will admit, just like anybody else in the fandom menace, that there are contingents of the fandom, small contingents, that we do not support or condone, who are tried and true neckbeards. And they generally spew hate at Jodie, just at Jodie, not at her portrayal of the Doctor, but Jodie herself for being a woman. And that is wrong. But the majority of us, the ones who have an issue with her portrayal, it is not because she is a woman. It is because of her inability to portray the character properly. I am sure, as most of you know, that it is not entirely out of the norm for actors to be miscast in roles. It happens all the time. I could name you a few examples about horrible miscastings, even in some somewhat current films. If you've ever seen the 2006 Superman Returns, which I actually like, I know I'm probably in the minority, but count me as a Brandon Routh fan, sue me. Anyway, pretty much everyone agrees that Kate Bosworth, who played Lois Lane, was horribly miscast. It happens. And when a person is horribly miscast, it can totally throw off the entire tone of your show. Especially, now luckily, Brandon Routh did a fantastic job, so he was able to kind of make up for that. But when you have a show like Doctor Who, when the entire show revolves around this singular character, and that character is the one that's been miscast, you have a serious issue. Because if the audience cannot identify with that main character and invest themselves in that main character, and the audience does not believe that that character is the character, you're done. Show's over. And that has been the problem with Jodie from the jump. I will not say that she's not a good actress. I have seen her on Broadchurch. I know what this woman is capable of. She is a good actress. But this isn't Broadchurch. This is Doctor Who. And part of the problem is that the other actors who were in the role, even if they didn't necessarily watch Doctor Who on their own time previous, they still did the requisite amount of research so that they would understand the character. I know you're going to say, well, Matt Smith had said, and there's even an article when he was being introduced as the Doctor that he said that he hadn't, he knew of it and had watched a couple episodes but wasn't really a super fan or anything. Yeah, that's true. He kind of grew up with it in the essence that pretty much everyone in the UK knows who the Doctor is because it's the fucking Doctor. I mean, it's a UK institution. But he wasn't necessarily a super fan, not like David Tennant, not like McGann or Colin Baker. But that didn't mean that he wasn't going to do his homework to make sure he got it right. So he went and watched a couple episodes of each version of the Doctor leading up to his own, so he would have an understanding of who the Doctor was as a person and how he changed and shifted as time moved on. And so he would also have an understanding of the companion's role and how they changed, of the show as a whole and how it changed. And it influenced his portrayal of that character and allowed him to take all of that together and come up with an iteration of the Doctor of his very own. But his version also had little tidbits here and there of each that came before. Because, as we all know, same software, different packaging, right? The intrinsic personality of the Doctor doesn't really change. He's still the same guy. Girl. Whatever. In his performance, you can see little bits of all the Doctors that came before. Each of the actors that have played this character have done an awesome job in making that apparent. Jodie, however, has not. Because she's not done any actual research into the past Doctors. She has not watched any past episodes. She herself, and if you think I'm lying, you can look up the articles because BBC doesn't hide them anyway. She has said herself that she was not a fan of the show growing up. It was not in her home when she was a kid. She did not watch it and still has not. Not even to do research. She is only going off of what is on the page and what Chibnall has given her. I'm sure, as a professional actress, that if Chibnall would allow it, she would have done the research. But I don't think that Chibnall is allowing her to go back and look at anything because he wants his version of Doctor Who to be so cut off from everything that came before that ne'er the twain shall ever meet. So she's pretty much had to make this up from scratch. And because she has no idea what she's doing, and quite honestly, she's a great dramatic actress, but I don't think she does too well in sci-fi. Just, some people are just not sci-fi material. I've always had this opinion. Someone can be a great actor, but that doesn't mean that they're versatile enough to carry off every film type. So, just saying. It's like, for example, Ben Affleck. When the Daredevil film came out, when I heard that they had cast him as Daredevil, I was like, huh? Ben Affleck is a good dramatic actor. He's a good comedic actor. But he doesn't pull off superhero very well. Granted, that movie failed for a number of reasons, but again, another example of miscasting. Whereas Charlie Oh, Jesus, I forgot his name. The actor who was playing Matt Murdock in the Netflix version. Bang on. Some actors can carry that off and can do sci-fi fantasy. Others just can't. Jodie is one of those types. It's just not her forte. It's not her wheelhouse. She has nothing to go off of to make this doctor her own, so she's picking pieces from past doctors, mostly from Tennant and Smith, and smushing it together and hoping that'll be enough. But she just comes off as brainless and annoying because, other than her companions who think she's the hottest shit since sliced bread and go off whatever she says like she's God, everyone else just kind of looks at her like she's, every time she opens her mouth.
You have got to be kidding me. Is there even a word for how dumb you are?
That's not a good start for your character, especially for someone like the Doctor, who was supposed to inspire awe and fascination when you meet him. The moment you first set eyes on him and he opens his mouth, her, you can't help but be drawn to this person because of their charisma, their charm, their knowledge, the everything that is about them. It just draws you in. Whenever 13 opens her mouth, all you want her to do is
shut up. I told you to keep quiet. Will you be quiet?
You know what I mean? So, moving on. We're all aware that the first female Doctor has been a subject of controversy within the Doctor Who fandom, but why do so many people hate Whittaker's take on the character? Beyond the fact that the Doctor is now a woman, here are some of the main points those who aren't on board with season 11 and 12 of Doctor Who tend to bring up when discussing where the series in their eyes went wrong. I'm just going to warn you, most of this is just restating the same point over and over in a different way. She represents wokeness. Doctor Who fans who disagree with the show's casting of Jodie Whittaker have expressed their feelings that the gender swap wasn't a move made out of necessity to the show's story, but rather one made in response to the current political climate. That is to say, some believe that the decision to cast Whittaker in the role wasn't made because there were any special plans in place for the change, but rather because the show wished to be more politically correct with an unprecedented and progressive casting. The casting would appeal to the current Hollywood trend of being more inclusive and signal to potential fans that Doctor Who has gotten with the times. Okay. Every time a Doctor has regenerated from one to another, it was always done with the utmost care, and there was always a reason for it. It was never done willy-nilly. Casting was never done willy-nilly, ever. This show is such an institution in the UK that when the BBC comes out with who the actor or actress is to play the next Doctor, it is so big it makes national news. Literally. It is that huge. So I cannot believe for the life of me that BBC would handle that so craptastically and not make sure that the reasoning behind regeneration makes sense. Each one of them had a reason for regenerating into the next and the next. And even if it wasn't stated outright at first, there was always something further down the line that backed it up. Like when 11 regenerated into 12. Everybody was like, well, we all knew that it was Peter Capaldi, but we also knew that Peter Capaldi had already guest starred as Cassilis in Fires of Pompeii in season 4. So people were kind of thinking to themselves, is this just like a genetic anomaly? Or is this Cassilis? What is going on? Now, they didn't address it at first, but years later, not until season 8, when he was already had regenerated into Peter Capaldi, Moffat actually took the time out to explain it. Not only that, but finish that particular plot thread when he also cast Peter Capaldi in Torchwood as Frobisher, he finished that plotline because he knew that it was important, and he cared about the canon enough to make sure that it was explained. There has never been an instance in Doctor Who that wasn't carefully thought out, carefully explained. Now, I will admit, sometimes canon can be a bit wonky, especially in New Who. It's kind of gotten a little wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey, mostly with Moffat era, because Moffat likes to play fast and loose, but not that fast and not that loose. As I have mentioned many times in my tweets and in prior YouTube videos, we as a fandom do not mind the adding on to canon as long as it is done properly, with respect, and makes sense to the overall narrative. If you work it properly and you do not disrupt the building blocks of the show, great, bring it on. When Russell first came on board and reignited the show in 2005, he brought something called the Time War. That was a huge disruption to overall canon because it was pretty much getting rid of all of the Time Lords except the Doctor himself. But it didn't disrupt the overall, at that time, 40-some-odd years worth of canon. Everything else that came before was still there. It wasn't disrupted. This was added on to. Timeless Children, on the other hand, has disrupted an entire 57 years worth of canon. The major building blocks that the show is built on, that foundation that makes a show what it is. If the show doesn't have that foundation, those canon rules, like where the Doctor comes from, his race, the name of the planet, how many lives he can lead, the regeneration thing, all those basic building blocks that have come about over the 57 years worth of show. If you don't have that, then you don't have a foundation. Drama shows and comedy shows can sort of get away with this, but complex shows that are complex sci-fi fantasy series like this, like Star Trek, Star Wars, they rely on canon. Rely. Because the shows are so complex and have so much story. Without that canon, it implodes. Dramas and comedies are not that complex. You can be wibbly wobbly with it. Sci-fi shows and fantasy shows, they're complex by nature. Therefore, you have to have a strong foundation to start from when you world build. If you implode your foundation, then everything on top comes down with it. And that's pretty much what Chibnall has done. And what Jodie has done by going along with it. I understand that she's an actress. I fully get that. And she's doing her job and she is playing the Doctor with what she has been given. But I also know for a fact that actors have a responsibility and a duty, at least the good ones, to ask questions. That if they have concerns, to voice them. I know this because actors, many times when they don't agree with something in a script or what's in the storyline, many times actors will go to the director or the writer and ask questions and want to know why such and such is this. Because they don't feel that this is right, because they have a genuine concern. So if Jodie doesn't seem to have a concern, or maybe just doesn't care, then it's just as much on her as it is on Chibnall. And especially the BBC. Doctor Who has never been a show to shy away from progressive stories, and even went so far as to suggest the Doctor's sexual preference was fluid in its first rebooted season. Fans hung on for that, but the female lead paired with season 11's constant touching on prominent social issues pushed some away from the series. It's hard to say if any of this crowd would return if the Doctor went back to being male. Though there's always a crowd that hops out with casting of any new Doctor. Fan dropout is more or less inevitable when there's a change in a lead actor across all franchises, even with a show where it happens as frequently as Doctor Who. This is true. I will admit I'm guilty of this. When David Tennant left, I was terribly hurt, and I didn't feel like I could devote myself. I kept watching because I am a fan first and always, and I wanted to give the show as much of a chance as I could. And I watched the entire era of Matt Smith, even though I was not impressed. I really did not connect with him. And I watched through the first maybe season and a half of Peter Capaldi. I connected a bit more with him, but by then I just couldn't. I felt like I was watching it out of a sense of obligation rather than a place of passion and true love. So I felt like I had to walk away because it just wasn't there for me anymore. It wasn't until I started binge watching during lockdown all the old seasons with Eccleston and Tennant that my passion for the show was reignited after so many years. Uh, yes, it is true that the show has always been progressive. We have never doubted that. I mean, you have storylines with the Daleks were pretty much uh, de facto like references to Nazism and to fascism. You have the Cybermen, which is your reference to communism and the removal of individuality. Believe me, we know that the Doctor and this show has always dealt with very progressive topics, but at the same time, it's not in your face. The progressive topics were always nuanced, the way that it flowed through, except with stuff like Cybermen and Daleks. That was kind of, but even that was more of like an allegory. It wasn't like you had the Doctor standing there for the last 10 minutes of the episode doing a speech. And I know what you're going to say. Oh, but the show started out with historicals. That was the whole point. Yeah, I know it did. But that didn't last. The historicals only went on for a couple of weeks. And Verity realized that this wasn't going to work. Nobody wanted to be preached to. Nobody wanted to do historical shit. So that stuff was thrown to the wayside in favor of the more sci-fi intensive stuff. Not to say that the show hasn't done some historical type episodes where the Doctor lands in a specific time period, like fires at Pompeii or meeting or the unicorn and the wasp. I'm not saying that he hasn't met historical figures or gone back to very important periods in time, but it wasn't what the entire episode was about. The episode was always about something else, and the fact that he was in a historical time period or met a very important historical person was just like the icing on the cake, kind of. It wasn't the total. And he didn't spend the last 10 minutes of the episode preaching to you about global warming or plastics or racism, because that's not what the fans want. They don't want to be preached to. They don't mind having the threads of progressivism in there, subtly nuanced through the episodes, which is something that Russell did very, very well. And even at times Moffat did too. Chibnall doesn't have that ability. With Chibnall, it's right here, in your face, constantly. And yeah, we ain't feeling that shit. I don't need to watch her stand there lecturing to them like a teacher. That's not what she's supposed to be. So, and as for the Doctor's sexual preference being fluid, it wouldn't surprise me if the Doctor was pansexual. I know a lot of fans, longtime fans, have always assumed that he, she, whatever, was asexual, and this is mostly because in classic Who, the Doctor wasn't really about that, at least not until Paul McGann took over the role. But that's not necessarily true, because when John Pertwee, third Doctor, was in the role, he was the first instance of a more romantic type Doctor. Not like in your face, the way you have with David Tennant and all that, but there's definitely the ability there, and it was the first time that we ever saw that, wow, he does genuinely, more than in a friendly way, care for some of these companions. Example, Joe Grant. He obviously had feelings for her, but let her go because she was in love and she wanted to get married. And then, do I need to even discuss Tom Baker and Sarah Jane Smith? That is a topic in and of itself. So, yeah, because he's Gallifreyan, the idea of sexual classifications, I think for him, is infantile. You're talking about a person who, one, is an alien, and two, is from a civilization so far advanced you can't even conceive it. So for him, the idea of classifying people into just female and male and sexualities as being homo or hetero, bi, whatever, I think for him, as Jack has said numerous times,
You people in your quaint little categories.
yeah, but I doubt that he sees sexuality in that way. I'm not saying that he doesn't feel sexual things. I'm saying I don't think he sees it in that narrow of terms. We're talking about someone whose civilization is so far advanced. Yeah. So this whole idea that the 13th Doctor has to embrace the rainbow, I genuinely don't think the Doctor give a shit, because he doesn't, or she doesn't see the labels. Not really. The Doctor really doesn't care. That is such a tiny and infinitesimal thing for him or her to even worry about. In that way, he's a lot more like Jack, or she is a lot more like Jack than people think. Let's see. It's hard to say if any of this crowd would return if the Doctor went back to being male. Yeah, they probably would. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they would check out if she regenerated into another female. This is not about Jodie being a female. This is about her ability to portray the Doctor. I went back myself because I wanted to have the context on this, and I watched the Ruth portions of Fugitive of the Jadoon just to see what all the hype was. And I could not believe Jo Martin's performance was fucking spectacular. She did and mind you, she only got her memories back. Ruth only got her memories back as the Doctor within the last, I want to say, maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes of the episode. Not even that much more, like last 15 or so minutes. She did in those 15 minutes, the last 15 minutes of the episode, more for the character of the Doctor and cementing her place as a Doctor than Jodie has been able to do in 2 seasons plus the specials. Straight up. The minute she opened her mouth and said,
Hello, I'm the Doctor.
I believed her. Because the personality shift was just right there on her face. As soon as she started opening up her mouth and speaking words, she was believable. Bang on, believable. And if they had casted her instead of Jodie, nobody would have said a word. They would have loved her. I mean, I don't exactly quite jive with the outfit. It's probably just the shirt because it's so bright. But everything else about her, I have no issue with. She's great. And if they had kept her as the actual 13th Doctor, nobody would have given a goddamn. They would have been on that train. Unfortunately, we're stuck with an actress that has no idea how to play this character whatsoever and comes off as a complete idiot. It's too big a change for the franchise. Doctor Who is a show where the story and the situations are always changing, but some things have remained solid in the show's 50-year history. The Doctor's change may not have had the same response from everybody, but there was universal acknowledgement that this was a big change for the franchise. For some, the change was just too much and made them rethink their following of the show in a major way. For others, they straight up said they were out from the moment it was announced and have not looked back since. To be quite honest, this is a problem that's been fairly common with Doctor Who for some time. There's always been a section of the fandom who has written off Doctor Who when a new Doctor comes aboard, some even before seeing that Doctor in action. Sometimes it's tied to a deep love to the previous Doctor, or maybe general exhaustion from that Doctor's run and not wishing to hop along on the ride with another. In either case, this issue was amplified when gender was brought into the announcement, but it's not necessarily unique to other Doctor castings. Okay, you get the pattern here. They're just kind of repeating the same thing over and over. You don't watch the show because you don't like her because she's a girl. So it's too big of a change. Not particularly. This show's been on for 50 some odd years. Fans are used to change when it comes to the show. We expect it because you know that not one single actor can portray the Doctor continuously for the entire life of the show. It's impossible. That's why this whole regeneration thing was done in the first place, to make it possible for the show to continue. We understand the idea of change. And for the great majority of the fandom, yes, it sometimes takes a little time to get used to the new Doctor and his personality and how he does things, but eventually over time you do get used to it. I'm not going to disagree that there are the small percentage that just can't deal and will walk away. It is true. Some of them love one version of the Doctor so much that they just can't. They just can't. I will admit, like I said before, that when David Tennant decided to leave the show, my heart was broken because Paul McGann was my first Doctor. I mean, the first one I saw with my eyeballs was Tom Baker, but my first actual foray into fandom was a mishmash of McGann and Chris in the first season of New Who. But the Doctor of my heart, who is my Doctor, that will never change, is David Tennant. So it was very hard for me to move on, because it wasn't just about David leaving. The entire Russell T Davies era was coming to a close, because not just David was leaving, but Russell was too. So the entire iteration of the show was changing and shifting, and it was very jarring, especially the way that Moffat started on season 5. Was a very thick wall between past and present, and it was very hard, I think, for a lot of fans to deal with that. I think the showrunners at the time were very aware. Don't forget that during season 4, when David initially decided that he wanted to leave, and they were preparing in these storylines to get him ready for that, Russell himself had said that he had discussed with Julie the possibility of putting the show to bed after season 4 was over and after the specials, because they genuinely were not sure that the show could go on without him. He had become so ingrained as the Doctor, not just in the UK, but around the world, that he literally was the Doctor. And it was so beloved by so many people that they really did not think the show could go on without him. That's why they had offered him the chance to stay and do season 5. Give the fans a chance to have a little more time and make his exit a little more smooth and so jarring. But he had said, and he had really, really, David has said this many times, that he agonized over this for a long while because he loves the show just as much as we do. He's only been a fan since the age of 3, and if he had his way, he'd be playing the Doctor at the age of 70 in a wheelchair. Like, I mean, you couldn't drag him away from the TARDIS. But he wanted to get out while the show was at its peak, while it was still something he loved doing and not a job. Not something that he felt like, oh, I gotta go to work today, what a slog. He wanted to leave the show while he still loved it, while he still loved doing it, and still loved being it. And he also knew that with Russell leaving, I don't think he felt comfortable with a showrunner that wasn't Russell. You know what I mean? So even though they offered him this at the end of the day, he decided, no, when the specials are over, I'm gonna leave. I remember first time I saw Matt Smith in the 11th hour. It broke my heart because he ran around the entire episode wearing basically ten skin in that tattered suit. It hurt beyond words to see him running around like that. And then that scene where he's in the hospital and he takes off the clothes and just throws them down like they're nothing and changes into a different set of clothes. It hurt even more because it was like he was throwing away the last bit that was left of 10 and of David, and it was just like it hurt a lot. But I was resolved to give him a chance. I was resolved to suck it up and give him the chance to prove himself. And I will admit, at first, I really didn't connect with him. It wasn't until Amy and Rory left and his outfit changed and Clara came into the picture that I somewhat connected a little bit more, because he was a little bit more serious than he'd been before. I've always been the kind of person that I don't mind a doctor that is manic, because that's part of their personality, to be kind of manic and a little eccentric. But I didn't like his, a 5-year-old child type of thing. I always thought that iteration and the reason that Matt Smith played the character that way was because when he regenerated, Amy imprinted on him. She was the first person he saw. She was 7 years old, or 8 or 9, something like that. But she was a child, so her childlike innocence imprinted on him and made him that way at first. And then after, the angels thing, when Amy and Rory got taken, he had completely changed. I would not have minded him being eccentric and a little manic, but my taste for it is more the way David played it and the way Chris played it and the way Paul played it. More, eccentric, but in a kind of balanced by the darkness. I felt like the early portrayal that Matt had was not very balanced. That's why I was able to connect a lot more with Peter Capaldi's performance, because you had the gruff, angsty, older doctor, but at the same time it was kind of tempered by that, there was still that humor, eccentricness in there. I had some issues with the portrayal at first because he was a bit too alien for my taste, and the fact that he couldn't interact well with normal people. But then again, like I said, I guess I'm too Tenet spoiled. But as time went on, he was able to, come out of his shell more and let's just say I was able to connect with Capaldi a lot more. But every time I see any bit of 13, and I've only seen a couple episodes just to give myself context, I can't connect with her because she doesn't have a personality to connect with. She's not believable as the character at all. She just takes even down to the dialogue itself, she has stolen. I don't know how she manages to do that because she's not allowed to do any past research, but maybe Chibs is just getting so damn desperate to make her more palatable to the audience, and he's picking little pieces of dialogue from Tennant and Smith and throwing at her, like giving her little bones just to make her a little more palatable, but it's not working. We're not stupid. Chibs must really think that the audience is that fucking dumb, but we're not. It's not like we can't tell that she's has no personality. Every time she opens her mouth, yes, even though we understood that this was a big change for the franchise, I think we could have dealt with it if it had been handled properly, but it obviously wasn't. I remember seeing her intro, that little tiny teaser where she's walking through the woods wearing the black hoodie jacket. That outfit she had on was actually a hell of a lot better, and I think if it stuck with that, it probably would have gone over a hell of a lot better than whatever the fuck she's wearing now. I will admit, I do know that for some, it's true. The change was probably a little too jarring, but that's a minority. That's a minority. For the most of us, we have no problem with her being a female. And don't ever say that, oh, you're being an islamophobe because you don't want to deal with a female doctor.
Don't take the moral high ground with me.
Michelle Gomez, the way she played Missy was on point. On fucking point. I'll admit, when I first realized that she was Missy, I was kind of like, because I wasn't sure how well this was going to go over. Maybe that's because I'm a little John Sims spoiled, because he's my favorite master and always will be my favorite master. But she genuinely did a fantastic job. Fan-fucking-tastic. That alone proved that it was possible for the fandom as a whole to accept a female doctor. She was kind of like the intro to get us used to the idea. She pulled it off because Moffat gave her the foundation to, and because she's a great actress and played it on point. Chibnall, not a good writer, not a good showrunner at all. Jodie, not best choice for this role at all. And when it comes to progressiveness, it's not just about the doctors. Y'all are forgetting something even more important. The companions. You honestly gonna sit there and tell me that the companions on the show were worthless? I'll admit, way back decades ago, they weren't always treated with the most respect, but you gotta remember, it's a product of its time. But in New Who, actually, I would almost venture to say, starting with Joe Grant onwards, they were treated with much more respect, especially Sarah Jane, Ace, because they were the Doctor's equal in every way. He never saw them as assistants or as helpers. He saw them as true equals and companions. The same goes for Rose, Martha, Donna. They might not have come from pristine, stellar backgrounds or have as much scientific expertise as him, even Martha being a doctor and all. But they did fantastic things in their own right. Not because they were born to, not because they have some weird, destiny to save him or that involves him, but because they were amazing people in their own right, and knowing the Doctor just helped that to shine through. Helped them to see what was already there within them. If anybody shattered the ceiling, it was the companions. They did that a long freaking time ago, and nobody gives them credit for it, which really sucks. Okay, next reason. The Doctor has historically been a white male. It would be foolish to assume that past precedent played no role in the backlash and that Jodie Whittaker's casting had nothing to do with the bucking of the status quo of Doctor Who. Since the beginning of the series, the Doctor has always been a white male, and while the show has changed in numerous ways since then, that has remained a constant. And while the Doctor being played by a male wasn't a factor in several adventures in the modern reboot, it has in a few key storylines. Various love interests like Rose Tyler and River Song were established as a heterosexual relationship, and the gender switch of the Doctor resulted in a can of worms that some viewers may not have been comfortable in addressing. Some merely thought the change was unrealistic, given the Doctor had never mentioned being a woman, or was it revealed as a possibility in the 50-plus years of being on television. So the change may have felt like disrespect to the show's history. No, not really. We all know that female Time Lords exist. You guys really just have, like, selective memory when it comes to Doctor Who of the past. You know, the Doctor as a female would not have been the first Time Lord lady in existence. Y'all forgetting Romana, Virani, both females, both widely accepted and well-loved as characters within the fandom. So, yeah, it can be done. Now, as for various interests like Rose Tyler and River Song, Billie Piper has already come forward and said straight up that it wouldn't matter to her. It would not matter to Rose what face the Doctor wore. Rose Tyler loves the Doctor. Period. End of statement. River Song, I don't know. I don't really care much for her character. I know that she didn't connect very much with 10 because she didn't know him well. She connected more with 11 and somewhat with 12 because that was her main timeline. I don't know how well she would have connected with the earlier Doctors because I think they would have seen her as kind of so, and they weren't like as romantically oriented. So I don't think it would have mattered if there was a sex change in there somewhere. I don't think it would matter female or male. The relationship between River and the Doctor was way, way beyond that. And it was more about the Doctor's personality himself that would lend, like we all knew that 10, she could never be with 10. It would never happen. Not in a million years. 10 was in love with Rose. Be all, end all, ever. Forever. So it made sense that the last time she would see him would be when he was his younger self. Now, 11 and 12, I'm not going to get into the debate about River versus Rose. You guys know my feelings about that and the fact that I am an unashamed, unabashed Dr. Rose person. So I'm not going to get into that because that's a total other thing. But him or her or whatever being a woman, I don't think would have any effect on the relationships in the past. As I've said earlier, I don't think the Doctor sees things that way. He's an alien from a highly advanced race. Again, the little notions that we have, those labels that we use, he's very much like Jack in that respect, where those things just really wouldn't matter. In the 57 years worth of canon that I've seen the show, he's most of the time been attracted to women. So there's that. But that doesn't mean that there's not possibility of attraction to males or aliens. I do remember, what was her name? Chim? The End of the World, the ambassador from Cheam, who was the tree, he did definitely seem very attracted to her, thought she was very pretty. So, yeah, I don't think he looks at labels. I don't think he cares. So, whether or not she was female or male, I don't think it really mattered. Honestly, I think that's just an excuse. Jodie Whittaker's Doctor is a product of a soft reboot. Some fans have stuck around and watched Jodie Whittaker's Doctor in action, then announced that they were done soon after. A lot of this happened during season 11 of the series and what was acknowledged as a soft reboot. I believe Whittaker's Doctor took some unfair flack for that, as fans were turned off more by the fact season 11 ignored much of the show's past than they were about there being a female Doctor. That being said, it can be hard to dissociate Jodie Whittaker from the situation when she represented the biggest change in season 11. The common fan may not be up on the whole changes with the showrunner theme, visual effects, and the general concept of a soft reboot to try and invite a new audience into the show. They just know the show wasn't the same, and the most obvious evidence of that was the female Doctor running around on the screen and calling her companions femme. For that reason, I feel that some backlash directed at Whittaker isn't so much about her performance or portrayal, but rather the overall change in the franchise she came to be the face of. What are your thoughts on Jodie Whittaker's Doctor? Share them in the comments, and if you have a hankering to watch Doctor Who, check out the episode streaming on HBO Max. Yeah, that's going to happen. As always, be sure to stick with Cinema Blend for all the latest reviews happening in the world of television and movies. I will admit, yes, there are probably some people that can't gravitate to her because she pretty much is the face of this huge change. But it's not just her portrayal that's the problem. It's the storylines as a whole. As the other YouTubers have said, Bowlestrek, Nerdrotics, Noel, as all of them have said, the storylines are atrociously bad, preachy, and boring. And there has been zero, count it, zero character development for the Doctor herself or either of the three companions. You don't feel any connection to these people because they haven't developed. Each companion that came before had their own distinct storyline. And from the time that they arrived in the Doctor's life to the time that they left, they were on a journey. So by the time that they left, they had intrinsically changed as people. They were never the same person they were before they met him. Rose's life was going nowhere. She was day after day doing the same thing day in, day out. Get up, go to work, come home, eat chips, go to bed, do it again. She felt like her life was going nowhere. And when she met him, her whole world changed. She became the bad wolf. And not only that, by the end of her journey, she became the defender of the earth. Well, really, of the universe. And she got her Doctor at the end. Martha became, the woman who walked the earth. She was so important that she was the one who saved his life. That journey was a personal journey for her. To know that deep down, just because she wasn't Rose did not mean that she wasn't brilliant. It didn't mean that she wasn't capable. It didn't mean she wasn't important. It didn't mean that she wasn't amazing. I mean, look at all the things that she did. Donna spent her whole life thinking she was worthless and having to listen to her mother browbeat her and treat her like garbage, saying that she was nothing and that she would never amount to anything and she would always be nothing but a temp and never move out of the house and blah, blah, blah. But by the end of her run, it was so heartbreaking. And the reason why it was is because by the end of her run, she had so much self-confidence. She became the person she was ultimately destined to be. This amazing Donna, who she'd always been on the inside, but was never confident enough to let it out. And by knowing him and him allowing her to have that confidence to let it out, she became the most amazing companion, I think, next to Rose that I've ever seen. That's why it broke my heart the way she left, because he had to take it all away from her. All those memories, all that growth, all that amazingness about her was just gone, and she just went back to being Donna. I hope to God in her life that her mother has finally started treating her with respect, because she deserves it. Now, I can't say much for Amy and Clara, because I didn't particularly care for them as companions, and I don't feel that they really, I mean, both of them had their own distinct journeys, but I just felt like it wasn't as fulfilling as the Russell T Davies era. The only one that I felt like had a really fulfilling arc, really had development, was Rory. And if it had just been the Doctor and Rory, I would have been happy. I thought Rory was great. And I really didn't believe he deserved to be treated the way he did. Anyhow, yeah, that was the article. So, yeah, I just want to say I have been looking at Twitter, and I've seen a lot of people voicing the same opinions over and over, saying that the reasons why we don't like the show is because of isms or phobes, and she's a woman, and blah, blah, blah. And that's not what this is about. That's not the reason why Timeless Children is so hated. Because as the Doctor Who Rabbi so eloquently put it, there is like the 15% of the fandom that loves Timeless Children and Chibnall Era and Jodie and all that. And then you have your 30 or so percent of the fandom who violently hate it. Like, and the ones that are true neckbeards and trash the actors and say things that they're not supposed to say. But then you have your middle of the road people, which is kind of us, who don't like it and want it to go away and kill it with fire, but we're not going to trash the actors to get our point across. Before the Timeless Children, we were willing to stick it out, and hopefully, again, hope against hope, that change would come, and that this BBC would find its way and fix this. So that's the 55% or so left. And then Timeless Children aired. And you just can't come back from that. I mean, not without a lot of years and a lot of work. You literally destroyed 57 years worth of canon. And for what? I mean, honestly. And about the progressiveness. I know a lot of the crazy fans will say, well, Doctor Who is being diverse. They've got, their companions are diverse, blah, 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 blah. Great. Check the box. It's not like companions weren't diverse before. It's not like characters in the show weren't diverse before. You have Vicky, who is black, who is in a relationship with a white woman. You have Martha, who is black. I mean, it's not like they haven't done this before. You have Jack, who is a humanoid, not from Earth, from the future, who is a pansexual. It's not like the show doesn't have progressive themes. They do know how to do this. But you choose to ignore that and then say, well, look, the companions are this or this or that. Okay, there's a distinct difference. Brian's black. Martha's black. Martha had a deep and involved storyline and a long and deep journey from beginning to end. Character development. She grew. She changed as a person, and she came out for it better at the end of her time with the Doctor. Ryan is black. Ryan does nothing. Ryan started out with a disability that after one episode has gone nowhere. Ryan is a plank of wood. Ryan stands there and says funny little quips to provide humor and shoots things like basketballs. Because, black and basketball, right? Same thing with Yaz. Yaz is Pakistani. I want to say. Or no. She's Muslim. But that's really all she is. She's a policewoman who doesn't actually do any police work. And she does nothing else when she's with the Doctor other than run around and advance nothing to the plot. Her character has not developed whatsoever. The only companion of the three who had a smidge of character development was Graham. And even that got kind of cut off at the pass. His journey was, I think, moving on from the death of his wife and also accepting the fact that he is a survivor. That he's still here, but it's okay. He doesn't have to have the guilt of surviving his cancer when his wife died. And there's also him coming to terms with the fear that the cancer will come back, which was horribly handled by the Doctor, by the way.
I should say a reassuring thing now, shouldn't I?
Yeah, probably.
Seriously? Like, honestly? Yes, we know the Doctor can be socially awkward, but neither of the other Doctors ever had an issue with comforting a companion or talking to a friend. That's what makes the Doctor so incredible to people. You know, that even though he's an alien, he's also at his core more human than humans. What she is, I don't fucking know. I don't think she knows. Anyhow, yeah, that is it for the article. So again, if you want to help me keep on keeping on, tap that like button, smash that bell, and visit me over on Twitter and on Patreon. I will post the links in the description. And don't forget, hit up those other YouTubers if you can. Critical Drinker, Bowlestrek, Nerdrotics, Tardis Zone, Starry Knight. Hit them all up. Our Doctor Who father, our Doctor Who Rabbi, and ProblemsBeing. Hit them up. See you guys later with more Doctor Who news when it comes. Peace out, y'all.
Good night.